And welcome back to episode 93 of the Weekly Tech Rant with me, Joe.
And me, Carl.
I feel for a second, Carl, you forgot to take stuff off mute there.
No, I'm here.
I thought we had a mid-COVID Zoom moment there. You know, like, Carl, you're on mute, can't hear you.
No, I'm here.
Good. Well, it is another scorcher of a day here in the UK. Here in the studio, I've been touching 31 degrees. I have a cold beverage in front of me of a certain type. It is only fit. How's your day going, Carl? How's things for you?
It is also hot up where I live, but it's been okay. It's not too bad day. Yeah, okay. Can't complain.
Excellent. I know you've been doing a lot of work recently with your home automation, haven't you? And playing with the new Zigbee kit. And I'm sure we'll have an update on that.
Perhaps big parcel from China arrived this morning, so that kept me busy.
It managed to pass customs.
It did. I was actually worrying that I might get a customs charge, but no, it went through. Delivered this morning.
Excellent work. Cool. So we'll have to get you to talk about that, I guess, on a future podcast about your home automation and the Zigbee setup. Because you've definitely got into the murky world of Zigbee and MQTT for all of your sensors and home automation kit now. So it's a great place to be. Right. Well, this week we have got another full fun packed show for you. We're going to talk everything from Intel to Xbox and everything in between. And the rumor mill is back. The sack is not so full this week, but we've got a little update for you. But given the fact it's so hot, I say let's kick off and let's get the first story out the gate then.
Yep.
So Intel's Arc has broken. It's come out. They exist. There is an Arc card you can buy, isn't there?
There is indeed, but you're going to have to fly to China.
Right. Okay.
Well, so don't get too excited. But yes, they're and it's only the entry level. So is it the A380? It is now gone live in China. It's retailing for about $150.
That's not bad.
So yeah, it's not bad. I mean, their entry level gives you 8 of the XE cores, 1024 of the FP32 cores, 6 gig of VRAM. It's fully DirectX 12 compliant. It even has hardware ray tracing support. And it doesn't even need an external power. It's just 75 watts. It can pull that from the PCI Express slot.
That's not bad at all. So the A380, so not the jumbo-sized aircraft that flies across the world.
No.
We're still talking graphics cards. Okay, cool. But I thought for an A380 for $150 was particularly cheap. I thought we were missing some zeros maybe at the end of that.
Very high mileage.
Yeah, very high mileage. But the amazing thing is it does actually exist. These cars are real now, so we should hopefully start to see some benchmarks coming out there rather than the Intel.
Next couple of weeks, we should see some.
Yeah, the Intel kind of spreadsheet. What am I about? PowerPoints of doom. Where they're kind of like, look,
PowerPoint
we're great.
Yeah, the slide.
But I think, given like you say, the price point and what you get for that, I don't think it's too bad, is it? Realistically, given kind of the kind of machines it's going into, so low end machines. I'm guessing we're talking partner, so integrated partner machines, aren't we? So guess like HP, all those guys, I suppose. Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, and you have your third parties as Zeus, MSI will all be putting them out as well. So I'm kind of interested to see where this sits against like 3050, 3060 from NVIDIA.
Yeah, so I guess 3060 is, I don't know, is that, I think this is way below the spec of a 3060, isn't it?
Yeah, I imagine it's probably 3050, I imagine. Not even a TI.
No, I was going to say, because I think Intel, I think I read when I was looking at the notes about this, Intel are claiming that it's 25%, so their statement, is it's 25% faster per, how do they pronounce the Chinese currency? Yuan,
or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah. So per spend that AMD's budget gaming offering, which is the RX 6400. And they are selling, I think the 6400 goes anywhere between 160 to 200 US, depending on obviously where you're buying it and fluctuations. And that is another budget spec. I think it goes into Dell, use them quite a lot. And AMD pitched the 6400 against the 1050 Ti and the GTX 1050. So much lower end, given that. But, given that Intel here are going to want to make some improvements, as you say, things like the fact they're touting hardware ray tracing. I mean, that's quite a stretch, I think. But I mean, I guess
I imagine you can't be too intensive for that, but some basic stuff, that's quite cool.
Yeah, I think if you got that in your machine, it'd be interesting to see. But yeah, definitely worth waiting to see what benchmarks we get on those. But I'm super impressed to see they finally shown the light of day and we're seeing them in retail, obviously, albeit not in our country or any other country at this stage. But
No.
yeah, it's real. That's the key thing. Cool. So talking of chips, then, what else we were saying is TSMC have done something pretty amazing. I think I have to say. Would you agree?
I have. I mean, we've not even seen what the 3 nanometer parts start shipping yet. And now TSMC are talking 2 nanometers. Yeah, I mean, due to consumers in 2025, so what a number of years yet. They might even have some new fabs online by the time that they're making those. They've called it rather originally the N2, after their N3. So, but yeah, there was some interesting tech here. So, the 3 nanometer, 4 nanometer, 5, 6, 7, whatever, have all been using FinFET technology. So, with the 3 nanometer, they're now moving to nanosheet transistor architecture. What that means, I don't know. It used to be something called
magic.
GAFETs. GAFETs? This is made up words. Gate all around field effect transistors. And apparently this is meant to reduce quantum tunneling effects and leakage. Who knew?
Do you need to be a quantum physicist to be able to understand how these chips are now designed? I get the feeling that you need to have several doctorates to be able to fully understand the other. But I mean, they say the fact that the 3 nanometer chips aren't even out yet, and as you say, the details are pretty scant as well. The fact now that she said that 2 nanometer is pretty impressive, isn't it? And I think but if we're fair here, Intel were touting, weren't we, what was beyond the 2 nanometer thing, wasn't it? I can't remember, what did they call it? They had a name, didn't they? Intel did, because it went they kind of it went to a different quantum level, wasn't it, or sizing, because of the bit there. But I can't remember. It'll come to me at some point.
This is over my head. I mean, for us laymen, they should have just said more shiny.
Yeah,
I'll be happy with that.
Oh, that's right. The Intel I remember now. Intel renamed their naming process, didn't they? Because they called it angstrom, because they aligned it to the size. So Intel's 2 nanometer process is called the 20A, which is the A for angstrom, which is an equivalent to 0.1 nanometers. So it starts to project out. I knew I had it somewhere in my notes.
Sorry, it somewhere.
Sorry to interrupt you there, sir. You do.
That's all right. But there are some, as with any kind of move in processor sizing nodes, there are some performance increases to be had. They are now touting 10 to 15% higher performance at the same power, or 25 to 30% lower power consumption at the same frequency and transistor count, compared to the 3 nanometer. And they also let on that 3 nanometer should actually be shipping later this year.
Impressive. I mean, how does Moore's law come into this? Because that's the thing, isn't it? Moore's law was touted to at one point that the chip manufacturers had exceeded it, hadn't they? They'd gone beyond that. But I think it seems that with the recalculations of the efficiencies in the chips and the different setups with the big and little cores, the Moore's law still appears to be in play, doesn't it? From what I can understand,
it does, and that's what they're saying. Those GAFETs that to reduce the quantum tunneling that enables them to keep going with Moore's law for now.
Yeah. So, and I guess for anybody that is thinking, I know Moore's law, I can't remember what it is. Moore's law is the statement or observation that was made by Gordon Moore, one of the co-founders of Intel, back in the early 60s. It basically was that the number of transistors on a chip doubles every 2 years, and the correlation with that is also that the cost of the computer itself also is halved. So I guess the cost element is probably difficult to justify, I think, at this point, because you don't buy.
I think we've hit a plateau so far, haven't we?
Yeah, and how often? It's not like the old days where you used to walk into your electronics superstore and buy a white box off the shelf, was it? From any number of manufacturers.
Yep.
I think that probably made sense. But today, the number of transistors piece. I mean, to see where we are today in terms of the amount of transistors is it's mind-boggling. I think it's the only way to put it up, in my opinion.
It is billions.
I mean, given what
tens of billions.
Well, as I say though, if you think back 10 years ago, it was 22 nanometer.
Yeah.
And that now is the equivalent of an elephant to an ant, isn't it? I guess it's kind of a bad analogy, I suppose, but where we are from
massively
22
to is that kind of scale though.
But then we're talking about say quantum tunneling, it sounds like, quantum physics. It's oh dear, yeah. Okay. You've lost me at this point.
They're trying to negate that fact, and you've got other teams trying to do quantum tunneling stuff.
Yeah, when we're operating at this atomic, subatomic particle level, I think, that is the point of where, as a species, you have to pat ourselves on the back and be like, we really have come a long way from stone tools.
We have, yeah.
But to bring it back to the line then, the one thing that TSMC have said, isn't it, or, well, they haven't quite said it, but it's speculated that the 3nm process won't be using the iPhone 14, though, will it?
No, it's not going to come out till probably after the iPhone 14. It's not ready yet, so won't be.
No, but Intel have also speculated, they've said that the 15th gen Arrow Lake in 2024, so 2 years' time, will be using their equivalent of a 3nm as well. So, we're a couple of years out on this, but I mean, I think it's really interesting to see. And again, people that are clearly far smarter than myself, which I have nothing to take away on that, is that you might be able to understand this, but from where I kind of the layman point, as you say, Carl, is they need to kind of make it a little bit simpler for us to understand, I think. Okay, how about this? Chip, more powerful chips, smaller bits, much faster, less power.
Sounds good to me.
Excellent. We're going to get so much flack for that. Anyway, okay. Yes, USB-C. Oh, yes. So after last week's discussion about the EU and the mandatory USB-C charging ports, or the standardization, wasn't it, of the USB-C as the main charging port, will be coming in 2024. The US now is looking to pick up and run with a similar law. So a group of senators, yes, so a group of senators.
Yeah, who we got?
We got Elizabeth Warren, so she's quite well known. Bernie Sanders, we know Bernie.
Bernie Sanders, Gina Raimondo and Ed Markey. They've written to the US Commerce Department, haven't they?
Which is Gina Raimondo.
Yeah.
Ed Markey. I'm just going to say I haven't heard about him before. But again, I appreciate we're not American, but he hasn't shown up anymore.
No, exactly.
So what do they want then? Sorry, they've written.
They've written to the US Commerce Department, haven't they? Basically to adopt similar policy to the EU. Really, they basically said, we urge you to follow the EU's lead by developing a comprehensive strategy to address unnecessary consumer costs, mitigate e-waste, and restore sanity and certainty to the process of purchasing new electronics. Really, it's a case of hold my beer. Let's see if we can do this as well.
I mean, good luck. That's all I can say, because they can't agree on much. But now the fact that they're looking to the EU as a part of, a bastion of good practice is kind of worrying. I mean, I'm not suggesting that the US is good practice, but the fact that they're looking over the water and going, those Europeans, they've got a good idea. They've got something good going on here. Would the Americans go with that? I would imagine probably not. What I would suspect is that somebody will need to make it sound like it's their idea. You kind of have people like that you work with who like to claim their ideas themselves. So kind of, you make it sound like it's their own idea, don't you, to ensure that they buy into those stuff. I get the feeling here there's a bit of that going on. So, but I get the point. I think this is a really good idea. And, we've talked about this at length before. We talked about it previously when they were talking about standardization. Actually, this isn't a bad thing, And I know you can argue, it stops, stops proprietary stuff. Well, actually, is that a massive big problem? If I go to the petrol station to put fuel in my car, the hole in the tank is the same as the hole in everybody else's tank, so the pumps fit. Is that really a problem? No, that's common sense, isn't it? And standardization. So it
is. I think regardless of whether the US, I'm going to say this is still in the early stages, whether they go for it or not, just the fact that the EU are doing it, phone manufacturers are not going to go to the trouble of having to build a USB-C one for Europe and then go, I'm going to give you micro USB or Lightning in the US.
I agree with you. And that is the thing, isn't it? As long as a large market is going to have influence on other large markets. And gone are the days where you used to get a different build for each market, which was the case, wasn't it? And previously gone by.
It was, yeah.
I think China probably, to a degree, is probably the only element there, because, as we know, there are some differences in the iPhone models in China, and I think in Korea there was Samsung used to do some different models for Korea, didn't they? But it didn't get done for us. But generally speaking, you're right. Mass-produced items such as phones are not going to be changed. And actually, if they can standardize on it, that's a reduction in supply chain costs. That's going to have a reduction in their bottom line. Doesn't mean the cost will go down to us as a consumer, but from a manufacturing standpoint, anything where you can reduce costs is positive, isn't it? So yeah, they'll want to do that.
It is definitely.
I do think though that statement though that they said was it the EU was wisely acted in the public interest by taking on powerful technology companies over this consumer and environmental issue. That to me, that statement though is kind of also I think a dig at the US government for the way that big tech kind of runs rules the roost, doesn't it? Runs roughshod over a lot of things. But it is. I know. It'll take a long while. I think if anything's going to happen here, it's going to take a long while. It's not going to be a quick fix.
Yeah, you're right, but hopefully they'll get there eventually.
Yeah, I definitely think so. But it's good. It's a good way to follow. I think it'll be something that'll get pushed around. It's going to be dependent on how many, I guess, of the senators and representatives are going to buy into this, and of course, there'll be a lot of lobbying. I'd imagine, given the US, I don't know. Based on how other things happen, isn't it? But I think there was a spokesperson for Senator Markey, whose name I keep reading is Malarkey. That's terrible, isn't it? Senator Markey told The Verge, the quote was, "Big tech is allergic to regulation. I'm already seeing companies push back on the EU's action." Yeah, I wonder who that might be. Senator Markey thinks that we'll have to continue to stand up to this industry to make sure their interests don't come at the expense of the environmental and consumer well-being. Yeah, fair point. That was definitely Apple. We didn't, you might as well have just said Apple.
Hey, we just say the name.
Yeah, trust me, it's a hell of a lot easier than playing this game of guessing game. But as we said last week, Apple, this isn't something Apple's going to shy away from. They've already made it clear that the iPhone is going to support USB. Well, they haven't said it outright, but it's evident in the supply chain and the USB-C is coming down the line. So yeah, what are we worried
15,
about?
You'll have it.
Yeah, what are we worried about? Let's go. Right then. So moving from one big tech giant to another, and well, I guess then you know what? I'm going to come out and say, if you're living in Russia and you want a copy of Windows, you are out of luck, because it turns out Microsoft have turned off the tap, haven't they, on that one?
They have. Well, they've stopped doing business in Russia, haven't they? Anyway, so you couldn't legally buy this, okay? But yeah, now it seems even if you try and download the ISOs for the evaluation version, the ones on the website, or try and download the Windows 10 media creation tool or the Windows 11 installation assistant that builds your USB so you can install it. Nope, Microsoft are blocking that now. You just get a 404 page. And to be honest, I can't really blame them. I'm pretty sure it was the Russian government not long ago said, basically, it's now okay just to pirate anything you want.
There was to that effect, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, to that effect. So Microsoft have gone, okay, fine. We'll stop you from downloading the software. Not that anyone determined won't be able to go and get it somehow, but we'll stop the main means.
I mean, this is no surprise, given the state of things as we've talked about, and everybody's aware of in the news, unless you've been living on a rock somewhere, you can't do business in Russia. And the fact that Microsoft not only is publicly saying that they are dealing with an onslaught of cyber attacks coming from Russian IP addresses and Russian known actors, isn't it? Because of the war in Ukraine. As you said, they cut Bill's ties to Russia back in, I think, March, wasn't it? I think around that time.
Yeah.
So they aren't selling the products and services. So yeah, the fact that you're not going to be able to trot down to the Windows download page and pick up your your trial ISO of Windows 11 is no big surprise here, really, is it? That they're blocking that, because
no, not at all.
But to come back to your point though, this is the pirate versions of this. I mean, let's be honest, it's probably out of control. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to contain Windows piracy, given how big it was 10, 15 years ago. I remember, now it just must be absolutely out of control. But they'll find ways to stop it. I mean,
people are going to use Windows, and they don't want to pay for it. They'll pirate it. So, all right, I reckon there's still a big trade going on there.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. So you're going to get piracy. You're going to have other ways of downloading it, because if people want it, they will get it, won't they?
Yeah, they will.
The sanctions here aren't going to stop it. This is just more of a public statement of like, you cannot have a copy of Windows, you cannot touch our software, because the president of Microsoft, Brad Smith, said before in a blog post, was that Microsoft was coordinating and working with the governments in the United States, the European Union, and the United Kingdom, and of course, offering business in compliance with sanctions. So this isn't necessarily just them cutting off door. This has been, they don't want to get slapped on the wrist because they've broken a sanction by allowing Russian businesses, consumers, whatever it might be, to access their software. Because it's one thing not doing business and removing your entities, but it's also breaking sanctions by allowing people to get access to software, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So, but so no more Russian Windows. That sounds a weird statement. I'm sure Russians have still got Windows and doors, but they haven't got Microsoft Windows at this stage anyway. Sorry, a long day. It is just too hot. It's just too hot. Okay.
Right. What do we have next?
Yeah.
No worries. So I had to do a double take on this one. So cast your mind back to early 2000s? And Intel had some, let's say, some pretty strong campaigns running for their partners and OEMs that really incentivized them with big rebates if they only bought Intel chips and not necessarily AMD, allegedly. Anyway, so the European Commission obviously had a problem with this, and rightly so. So they took them to court in 2009, and it concluded that Intel had indeed behaved in such a way back from 2002 to 2007. So they hit him with just over €1 billion fine.
I think it was, huge fine.
Yeah, and I didn't realize Intel had been appealing this ever since. So they appealed this decision unsuccessfully in 2012. In 2014, they brought the case to the European Court of Justice, which sent it back to General Court. And then in 2017, basically it's been going back and forth ever since. But surprisingly, in January of this year, the court actually sided with Intel. So stating that the European Commission's analysis was incomplete and that it hadn't established a legal standard that the rebates at the heart of the matter were anti-competitive. So obviously now the European Commission are appealing that decision. But in the meantime, and this is the bit that I go, what? Intel has gone to the EU General Court seeking compensation, is now asking for €593 million back, plus interest based on the European Central Bank's refinancing rates. So they want their money back. Not all of it. They want more than half of it, plus interest.
I mean, is this like when your child keeps going, please, eventually, all right, fine, I'll give it. It does seem to be under it. But I mean, kudos to Intel for challenging it and continually challenging it. But let's be honest, is it $1 billion fine is a lot of money. And as you say, having it back and saying you want the interest on it as well. It's got a lot of outgoings at the minute. There's a lot of fabs to be built, isn't there?
There are, but I think they're not going to get their money back until this is concluded. Definitely,
no.
And I said allegedly earlier, but being in the hardware business around that time, there were some iffy rebates going on. A lot of iffy rebates going on.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of working this out earlier based on how many people are in the EU. So effectively, that's like Intel wants everybody in the EU to pay them $1.50 or €1.50, excuse me.
€1.50. Yeah,
cough up.
Yeah,
but I mean,
and the bit I find, so this other court, they sided with Intel. They didn't actually say that Intel weren't guilty. They just stated that the commission's analysis was incomplete.
Yeah, so that you're right. That could be interpreted either way. That could be interpreted that you're right. Intel have got a strong case for an appeal, in which case we need to go back and it needs to be reanalyzed. Or perhaps Intel were right and there was no anti-competitive behavior here. But either way, as far as the court's concerned, it isn't it isn't clean cut. It's just, as you say, it needs to be looked at again.
Definitely.
But are we genuinely surprised, though, for anti-competitive behaviour, given what was going on at that time?
That time, not in the slightest. It was the done thing, wasn't it? Microsoft as well.
Well, I was going to say, okay, this was not the early 2000s, so the anti-competitive stuff for Microsoft happened some years before, but it's in the same way around the rebates, isn't it? The conditional rebates, especially to the OEM partners. that's kind of, I guess, like an open secret that those things happened. And Intel, particularly at that time, were the market leader.
And to be honest, it hasn't been until the last couple of years that you can readily go to any of the laptop manufacturers and buy an AMD laptop. And that's not because AMD don't make good chips. Far from it. It's in the laptop realm. I'd say Intel are dominant from a performance and power saving thing. Make the much better chip. But yeah, there's something holding those OEMs back.
I guess is it long partnerships, isn't it? It's the same, in a funny kind of way. Look at the OS market. Windows is dominant and has been for 30 odd years, isn't it? Really, people have come and gone, but nobody's really managed to move in Windows as the key operating system of choice, have they?
No.
The rebates, I think, have kind of gone away. I think those have moved away, haven't they? Really now,
yeah,
and especially the way that Microsoft license Windows now, I think, has changed that game. But you could argue, same with Intel. Intel have been the CPU of choice for many a year. As you say, not because AMD have an inferior product. Maybe at one point their product was not on par, but certainly no way inferior. Today, that argument doesn't hold any water whatsoever. No. So yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by this. Like you say, I don't think though that Intel will get the money back. I would imagine this is definitely going to go back to the court, and it might be the case that they get a retrial. I don't know, but fair play to them though, for fair play for it. And and like you say, it's not a small change, is it? With that interest on top of it either. So good try. Good try. That's all I can say, Intel. But better luck next time.
Well, on to someone that could have tried better a long time ago. So, we spoke about this back in December.
We did.
So in the they were trying to roll out C-band 5G, and obviously the FAA or the airlines have thrown a bit of a hissy fit because they reckon it comes too close to the bands used for altimeters, don't they? But anyway, so the carriers decided that, okay, even though there's no evidence, and there's still no evidence that these things interfere, they will delay rollouts in certain areas, reduce power, etc., while the airlines sort their mess out. Well, the FAA have finally put a plan in place. They are going to be adding what they call filters to these altimeters that allow them to cooperate nicely. Now, there's still a big gap, though, isn't there? So the 5G C-band uses, 3.7 to 3.98 gigahertz. Not the carriers who's using all that. Altimeters use 4.2 to 4.4. So there's a 220 megahertz guard band in place to kind of protect altimeters from 5G or anything else in a similar band that could interfere. And this is the bit that really, really bugs me. So the FCC did extensive testing 3 or 4 years ago and couldn't find any evidence that this, under reasonable scenarios, would be a problem. And the FCC and the aviation industry didn't do any of their own testing. Just did nothing until they were starting to roll out 5C, and then really, threw a hissy fit, for want of a better word here. I went all the way to Congress to try and get this delayed, didn't they?
They did, and I think, as you say, when we talked about this when it came up around the 5G rollout and the pushback, as you say, the fact that all of the evidence sits firmly in the court of common sense and that there is no evidence to suggest at this point in time, given the circumstances and including that guard band, that there could be any risk to aircraft.
No.
Why is it a problem?
These same aircrafts fly all around the world to other areas with 5G C-band and have no problem.
Exactly.
Maybe the US is just a special case. The world is different. Well, we know it is in a lot of things. But ultimately, what this really comes down to is, at the time, they did, either a poor job designing the altimeters, or they cheaped out, or both. They didn't actually put any filters in place to block out frequencies that might stray. Why on earth would you not do that?
I don't know. It beggars belief, I think, on this, because of the seriousness this particular type
Yeah.
of technology. The seriousness, of course, of an altimeter in an aircraft, because it's a key component in flying that aircraft. I know they have redundant systems, but you wouldn't take off without one, so to speak. And the fact that this is done, but the carriers or the airlines just will not go down this road.
No.
I don't understand what they're pushing back on here, isn't it?
I mean, the statement they had. So obviously the carriers are fine. The airlines aren't happy with the FAA's decision. And they said, we have serious concerns that the FAA have placed a burden on the aviation industry to act in a way that would previously be considered by the FAA itself to be reckless in the context of design choices to safety critical avionics. I mean, be honest, it's the aviation industry's own freaking fault. They're the ones that's putting everyone at risk by doing a poor job to start off with. And now basically they want to blame everyone else but themselves. I presume they probably want someone else to pay for this retrofit as well. And they could have done this while all their planes were grounded during COVID.
Well, that would have been a very good time to have done any heavy maintenance. I think a lot of airlines did, didn't they?
Especially considering they were getting massive money from the government to stay afloat.
I think one of the things one of the hearings came out. There was a point around one of the experts was saying when altimeters were designed, altimeters is it's an old design in the sense that the technology was designed pre 5G, pre 4G. At the time, the most sophisticated communication was satellites, wasn't it? And therefore, the altimeters could ignore certain boundaries because it was never going to happen. But fast forward, I guess 60 odd years, or give or take, whatever it might be, spectrums are congested now. But given the fact
they've been getting congested for the last 15, 20 years, no one's just decided not to do anything about it.
You're right. And given that the fact that even that we've still got a guard band here that is still quite wide, there's still
220 megahertz in radio frequencies is huge.
Well, it is. It's massive.
Yeah,
but I have to say, for once, I'm at a loss for words because it just does not make any sense of why this wasn't dealt with. Because you could argue, this is a conversation. Realistically thinking, if we were doing this podcast 5 years ago, you'd be talking about it then, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we still have the same thought pattern 5 years ago. Why is this a problem? Why was this not fixed? Why was this not, the mitigation stuff in the initial designs? And even if it wasn't, why have you not fitted it since?
It is bizarre, absolutely bizarre. I mean, look, I will state, the airline industry is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the world, and safety is paramount. And at no point, clearly we're saying that there's any safety concerns here. That's not the suggestion, and that's not, I don't think, the argument. Nobody's made a point to say, planes are unairworthy, but it's kind of, it is leaning into that conversation, isn't it? But there could be airworthiness concerns of and the FCC then could pull. The FAA, not the FCC, excuse me. The FAA could pull, an airworthy certificate for any aircraft in the US or flies into the US for not complying or having, the right equipment. But when actually the reality is, works perfectly fine. There is no concern. So this is a fundamental issue that should have been fixed a long time ago. That's the only way I think you can answer it.
That's what my mind boggles. For an industry that has so much regulations about safety, that this is even a problem to begin with.
Yeah, it is.
These filters should be in place from the beginning or 15, 20 years ago. It should never have been a point where, there's nothing in the frequencies now, so we just won't bother.
No, not at all.
It should never have been a design choice.
It's very, very odd. Because, I think, on a final point, you're right. The spectrum information has been public for a long time of what spectrums are going to be used.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago they announced this and did their own testing.
Yeah.
But the FAA and the airlines decided just to bury their head in the sand.
Absolutely peculiar. Very odd. Very odd. Okay. Coming back out.
Moving on before I get too stressed about that one.
Coming back out of that rabbit hole. So we were talking the other week, weren't we, around PCI Express improvements, and it appears now that the PCI 7 standardization is already underway, and specifications have been released, or
They were
sorry,
announced.
specifications
Yeah.
have been announced, not released. Excuse me, announced. So PCI 7, we've got PCI 5 today. I was going to say, where's PCI 6? Now, you politely told me whilst we were prepping before coming on air, you were like, PCI 6 is already announced this year. I was like, oh, yes. I just
Yeah, well,
forgot
it was
about
having
that.
the last year. It just hasn't made it yet to motherboards. I reckon it'll be another year or so before we start seeing those.
Yeah. But this is PCI 7 then. So this is what, the 2025 onwards, isn't it?
It is. And like clockwork, it's all about doubling everything. So my mind boggled, actually. I was looking at the chart they put out. Okay, so PCI Express 3 is still a decent system. If you have a graphics card in an X16 slot on PCI Express 3, you probably won't see any benefit by going to PCI Express 4 or 5, really. Maybe in a few fringe cases. And that gives you, what, 32 gigabytes a second of bandwidth in a 16X slot. Or if PCI Express 7 or 1X slot will do that for you.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you want the full 16, you get 512 gigabytes of bandwidth.
Wow. That's impressive. What's the what's the interconnect? What is it? What's Apple's one? That's up to 400 gig, isn't it? I think on the M1 Pro, isn't it? Or Max?
Isn't that the memory bandwidth?
Yeah, I was gonna say that. That's just say. I was just thinking where I've seen a similar.
We are getting
similar
close to memory bandwidth, though I imagine latency is still a lot worse on PCI Express first, your RAM, your memory controller. But yeah, pure bandwidth wise, now it's getting up there.
Wow. I mean, that's some big old pipes there, isn't there, for data? Especially as you say, for graphics cards. That's an impressive, throughput there. I mean, and the jump as well. I mean, given the jump,
it's basically doubling everything, isn't it? So yeah,
just completely
PCI Express 3 topped out at topped out at 32 gig, then 4 went to 64 gig, then PCI Express 5 goes to 128, 6 goes to 256, and now 7 goes to 512.
And for data,
so
then,
they basically aim to double everything. Yeah.
And for hard drives, then, I mean, this is a massive improvement, isn't it, of accessing storage?
Yeah.
So what are we? What can we see? I mean, SSD.
What can you use to fill the hard drive that fast, though?
Well, I was just thinking. I mean, given the fact that SSD improvement over time, we're seeing reduced latency, aren't we? We're seeing improvements in write speed and performance. Now you've got the interconnect, if you will, the bandwidth there.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, well, yeah. I think now you I think we're going to go back to the stage where the disk you can't outright the disk, because there was a while, wasn't there, especially with downloading speeds, internet stuff like that. There's a point where download speeds were way below that of disk write, weren't they? But now obviously with a lot of faster download speeds, you can now have a point sometimes that where you're maxing out to a degree. I think some high speed downloads.
Could we start seeing SSDs as a level 2 RAM? They become that fast now that the latency won't be there, and they're not quite as fast as the RAM, but they'll be a good second job if you run out of RAM.
That would be pretty impressive, wouldn't it? That's like the old days of the old swap partitions on your hard disk.
Well, you still get a swap file, don't you?
But you don't use it. I mean, we don't really use it.
It's not that quick, no.
No, and typically speaking, given majority of systems these days, I say the majority, just to be clear, not everybody has tons of RAM. But if you've got a 32 gig or a 64 gig system, generally speaking, you won't be touching a swap file in many cases, will you?
No, the majority of systems don't ship with that. I've been looking at laptops again, and literally the default seems to be 8 gig. I was like, who's still buying 8 gig laptops? I wouldn't buy anything less than 16.
You're not going down that rabbit hole again, are you?
I was I got outbid on a laptop on eBay the other day. Thank God.
Dear.
I could have been shot, but it was a very nice Asus Zephyr G14. It had a 3050 in it. It had a nice AMD 5900, 16 gig of RAM, a terabyte SSD. It was looking, and a 14-inch chassis. It was looking very nice. God, I got outbid.
Step away.
Yeah, I know. And annoyingly, it went for 600 quid in the end, which was a bargain. My fingers were just not quick enough.
Oh dear. Well, yeah, you're right. 8 gig on 8 gig is paltry, I'm afraid to say. Absolutely.
No, I know.
I wouldn't want to be seeing that. So no, definitely not. But all be well, you never know. In 2025, you could potentially have a PCI 7 laptop with loads of memory and RAM.
Do worry how much heat this is going to generate. That's a lot of things to be pushing around.
Well, yes, that is a valid point. The thermal the thermal piece of the thermal what's it TDP is something that's going to have to be addressed here, isn't it? But look,
Definitely.
they've got a couple of years at best, and we haven't got 6 yet. So let's see what 6. Let's see that 6 gives us something first. But yeah, very cool.
Exactly.
Very cool to see the speed impressive there. But unless they can start to, I'll tell you, actually, that makes me think of something, right? The one thing, we talk about machines, motherboards, improvements on memory bandwidth, improves this, but SSDs are getting smaller. You've got M2 cards which are tiny. Why is the graphics cards seem to be going the opposite way and keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger?
Well, I think some of them have more transistors than your CPU does. And I suppose cooling, they are run very, very hot. I mean, my it's a hot day, but my NVIDIA, I got a 3070 Ti, the Founders Edition. What are we running at now? We're about 60 degrees at idle, which is higher than my CPU, and it gets up to around 83, 84 when I'm gaming.
Yeah.
It gets hot. And that's only a 3070, 3090 gets a lot hotter, I think.
But it's a valid point, though. They are getting big, aren't they? They are. That's the biggest component in your machine is the GPU.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to when AMD bring their RDNA 3 out, because that's meant to take a lot less power and be a lot faster. So I hope you might start to see smaller graphics cards.
That would be good to see. I'd have to say, I want to see that. That's my one.
Could you imagine a return to a single slot cooler?
Oh, if it's efficient and it gives me the power and speed I want, that's all I care about.
Yeah.
Talking of gaming, then, so Xbox Cloud Gaming then is something you can play today. Supports Xbox games on TVs, on your iPad, on your phone, even on PC potentially, and it allows you to play Xbox games remotely with an Xbox controller. Or does it support other controllers, or is it just Xbox? I can never remember now.
I think you just need a controller.
A controller source system, which is great. But what happens if you've just got a keyboard and mouse, or you're on your laptop, or you don't have a controller to hand? Well, you've been out of luck at this point, haven't you? Because very few Xbox games support keyboard and mouse, and those that do are not supported with Xbox Gaming. However, this is going to change, because it now seems that Microsoft announced that they are going to be supporting the Xbox Cloud Gaming, or xCloud, with keyboard and mouse support, which is brilliant, because actually, I suppose one thing I was thinking about this before is that there are quite a few Xbox games that do support keyboard and mouse, but for accessibility reasons rather than an alternative play option. So actually, if you have an accessibility issue and you have to use different peripherals, so to speak, you've been out of luck on using xCloud, but this could close the gap on that. This is actually really impressive the more I think about it.
Could do. I mean, if we get some more games to actually support keyboard and mouse, but I can't remember who it was now, but Flight Simulator is going to support it, aren't they?
They are, and I think they also said, wasn't it, Sea of Thieves, Minecraft, Halo Infinite, and Fortnite were all ones that were tagged to support it in first run.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that could be good. I think, giving that there. And also, Microsoft are also bringing more games to the Xbox Cloud Gaming library. I couldn't think of the word there, just didn't exist. I don't know, I can't remember how many we've got there at the minute, but I think it's going to be to the full library. They said originally when they announced it, didn't they? It was going to be the full library of games, but that hasn't happened at all, has it? It's been quite a small subset.
No.
But there is also an announcement that at some point we should be able to get access to games we already own. So a bit like, I suppose, the NVIDIA Shield style streaming.
Yeah.
So I think this is a great piece. I don't use this enough because I'm not in a situation where I need to. But I think if I was somewhere where I was in a hotel or somewhere else where I didn't have the controller with me and I wanted to play some games that supported it, I think I would try and do more. I would try and do more of this. What do you think? Something? I mean, have you tried? I mean, I don't know if you've tried it much since we used it, but
I've not really. I haven't been traveling, but I am. Well, I'm traveling next week, but I won't be able to use it then.
No.
But when I get back, I am traveling for business. I will be in a hotel with hopefully decent internet in the Netherlands. So I'm going to pack my controller and give it a whirl.
Oh, excellent! So you can give us a test and let us know how Xbox Cloud Gaming works in the real world. Then, yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a hotel Wi-Fi. It could be dicey, but we'll give it a go.
Excellent. Alongside this, they also have announced a new API, haven't they, called the Display Details API, which allows developers to give better resolution despite any quality or latency issues. So if you're playing on a TV, isn't it, through one of the built-in apps on a smart TV or other hardware, you as a gamer will still get better performance, so to speak. And I was looking down the line of it, some of the things that they were looking at, is that some games will be building automatically. They'll need to some will need retooling. It should give a better performance. So at the moment, Xbox Gaming scales down to 720p on a phone, and on a PC or web, it's 1080p only. There's no word yet whether they're going to support 1440 or 4K in the new TV app. But I think let's be honest, 1080 for the majority of times you want to pick up and play is perfectly fine in my.
That's fine, yeah, definitely, and it's No, I agree. I'm a bit annoyed that the Xbox TV app only works on the very latest Samsung TVs at the moment.
Yeah, that is frustrating. I agree.
When are they going to bring out their streaming stick? I keep hearing about this, but it keeps being delayed.
Good question, because that seems to have gone very quiet, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
Very quiet.
Fingers crossed, we'll see it out soon.
No, but I thought it was a good announcement from Microsoft anyway. Right then, I think it's that time of day again where. Oh yes, it is time for the Tech Rant Rumour Mill, and well, I'm afraid to say it's a little bit empty this week. But we've got we do have a little bit of a sneak peek from Tim Cook on Apple's rumored AR headset. So actually, words from the man himself. Now, he didn't go out of limb and say that the AR headset was coming. You can pick it up on X number of days. It's going to cost X number of pounds, dollars, pesos. But what he did say, apparently, though, was during an interview with a Chinese media outlet a couple of weeks ago, he expressed all his excitement about AR, and he talked around how about they've got, nearly 14,000 apps of AR kit in the App Store, and therefore AR is the experience of millions of people around the world. And then apparently he went on to say, sort of stay tuned in, you'll see what we've got to offer. It's like, oh, is that
much?
I mean, is that coming out? It's like, does that mean that AR is VR is coming out? I would say that's probably a good sign to say that something is happening, isn't it? Apple's PR machine is cast iron, watertight, doesn't give anything away, and anything Tim Cook would have said in this interview would have been sanctioned at the highest level by every marketing team, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So
completely.
This is a very
unless they haven't got something to show soon.
No, this is a very careful statement from him. Obviously, it's very ambiguous as well. Let's be honest, because he actually didn't give anything away, did he? Realistically,
no. Other than they've got something.
Yeah, but Reality OS is something that they have been working on. We've seen a lot of references to that show up in the code. People have talked about it at dub, in terms of words. So the references are there also in iOS 16 to Reality OS. And we know that there have been rumored leaks that the board of directors have been shown the hardware, and there we go. So when is it going to come out? Well, we keep saying very unlikely that it will come out before September, because that's the iPhone launch. Would they scupper an iPhone launch, or at least, would you allow an iPhone launch to be upended by another product? No, I don't believe you would you?
I'm two minds. Generally, no, but it is their consumer event, and wouldn't it be nice to have a one last thing, just something different?
Well, other than
that's not Apple styles.
No, because we haven't had a one last thing forever, have we? And that the last time he did it, the last time he did it, where he touted the Mac Pro, he didn't even really do that, did he? Because the one last thing was the Steve Jobs gimmick.
It was, but we've had nothing revolutionary as such. The iPhone was kind of revolutionary. I can imagine the ARV headset, if done right, could also be revolutionary. It could be the next big thing. But are they at a stage yet to do that right?
That's a point. But I mean, so we could see it September potentially, or they could run it in January. Counter to
which is
CS.
what who was it saying that?
Gurman, was it?
No, Michin Kuo.
Yeah.
Was saying that, wasn't it?
So do you remember a few years ago, Apple did run a couple of press releases at the same time as CES? You know, I wouldn't be surprised if they're pulling something big out of the bag. They'll do it on their own terms because Apple don't do trade shows, so they weren't going to be popping up anywhere else. But there you go. Right, then that's a pretty good point for us to close out for today before I melt in this heat. I will not forget tonight to do the housekeeping. So, unlike last week where, it dawned on me that I hadn't done it. So this week, of course, as a reminder, you can find us on Twitter at Weekly Tech Rant. And of course, all of our show notes and anything of information about what we talked about tonight and all the other shows are available on techrant.online. And we are available to download as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from and all the usual places and haunts. So please, as always, give us a like, give us a share, tell us what you think you like, tell us what you don't like. I'll be happy to take your feedback. And we'll be back next week for a little bit of a different show, but more on that next week. I've been Jay.
I've been Carl. Have a good evening, y'all.